Coming back from the hospital, I found a note. We didn't think you'd make it, so we packed your things. Signed, your favorite daughter-in-law. A week later, I received an unexpected inheritance and changed my will. I stood in the entryway of my own home, clutching that cold piece of paper in my trembling hands. My legs, still weak from 3 weeks in the hospital, threatened to give out beneath me. The septicemia had nearly taken my life. The doctors called it a miracle I'd survived. But standing here now, I wondered if surviving was really a victory. After all, the house was eerily quiet, too quiet. Usually, when I walked through this door, the familiar creaking of the floorboards welcomed me. Now, there was only silence and the faint smell of unfamiliar furniture polish. Not the lemon-scented one I'd used for 40 years. I made my way into the living room, my hand gripping the wall for support. My breath caught in my throat. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Old oak cabinet where I kept James's childhood photos was gone. The vintage lamp my husband Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary vanished. Even the worn leather armchair where Robert used to read his evening paper was replaced by a sleek, modern monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a furniture showroom. James, I called out, my voice sounding small in this suddenly foreign space. Diane? No answer. I made my way to the kitchen, still clutching Diane's note. More changes. My collection of hand-painted teacups that had lined the open shelving. Gone. The walls, once a warm sunshine yellow that Robert and I had painted ourselves the summer before James was born, were now a stark, clinical white. On the kitchen counter sat several cardboard boxes labeled Martha's Things in Diane's perfect handwriting. I opened the top one with shaking fingers. Inside were my photo albums, hastily stacked. 40 years of memories carelessly shoved into a box as if they meant nothing. My wedding album was on top, the one with the photo of Robert in his Navy uniform, his eyes so full of love it still made my heart skip. Below that, James's baby book, every milestone lovingly documented. First smile, first steps, first day of school. I'd been so proud, so full of hope for his future. As I lifted the album, a photograph slipped out, James at his college graduation, standing between Robert and me, his face beaming with promise. I'd been so proud that day, so certain my son would build a life that would make us proud. What had happened to that boy? I sank into a kitchen chair that didn't feel like mine anymore, and finally let the tears come. Not just for the betrayal I felt in this moment, but for all the small betrayals that had led to this one. The gradual distancing after he married Diane, the excuses for missed Sunday dinners, the way Diane's eyes had always lingered critically on my furnishings, my clothes, my cooking. We didn't think you'd make it, the note had said. Not, we hoped you would recover, or we prayed for your health. They had been waiting for me to die, planning for it. And when it seemed I would, they hadn't wasted any time claiming what they thought should be theirs. A sound at the front door startled me. Keys jingling, voices. I quickly wiped my tears as James and Diane walked in, stopping abruptly when they saw me. Mom, James's face registered shock. You're home, not you're well, or thank God you recovered. Just surprised that I was there at all. Diane's perfectly made-up face showed a flash of something, disappointment, before settling into a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Martha, what a wonderful surprise. Her voice was honey-coated glass. We weren't expecting you until next week. The hospital said that I might not make it at all. I finished for her, holding up her note. James at least had the decency to look embarrassed. Mom, we were just redecorating my home, packing. Away my life? I gestured to the boxes. Moving in before I was even gone? It's not like that. Diane stepped forward, all concerned now. We were just preparing in case. Well, the doctors weren't optimistic, Martha. We wanted to be practical. Practical, I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. Mom, you've been living alone in this big house since Dad died, James said, using the reasonable tone he'd adopted more and more over the years. We've been telling you it's too much for you. After your infection, we thought, you thought I was finally out of your way, I said quietly. That's unfair. Diane's voice rose slightly. We've only ever wanted what's best for you. I looked at my son, really looked at him, the boy I'd raised, the man who now stood before me, unable to meet my eyes. When had he become this person? When had his wife's wishes become more important than his mother's dignity? I need to rest, I said finally, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I'd like to sleep in my own bed tonight. Is it still there, or have you packed that away too? James looked pained. Of course it's there, Mom. This is still your house. But it wasn't. Not anymore. As I made my way slowly up the stairs, I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't stay here. Not with the ghost of who my son used to be. Not with Diane's thinly veiled impatience. Not in rooms that no longer held the memories I'd built over a lifetime. I would need to find somewhere else to go. But first, I needed to sleep. To gather my strength for whatever came next. As I lay in my bed, still mine, though the familiar quilt was gone, replaced by a pristine duvet I'd never seen before, I stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise to myself. This wasn't over. I might be down, but I wasn't out. Not yet. I had survived septicemia against all odds. I would survive this too. Little did I know that in just 7 days, life would hand me an unexpected card to play, one that would change everything. I lasted exactly 3 days in what used to be my home. 3 days of Diane's overly sweet inquiries about my health that thinly masked her impatience. 3 days of finding more of my possessions either packed away or simply gone. 3 days of James avoiding my eyes while asking if I'd given any thought to downsizing. The final straw came when I overheard them in the kitchen, voices low but clear enough through the old heating vent that connected to my bedroom upstairs. She's recovering faster than the doctor said she would. Diane's voice was tight with frustration. We need to talk to her about assisted living again. I know, James sounded tired. But she just got home. We can't wait forever, James. We've already paid the interior designer. The contractors are scheduled for next month. Your mother can't stay here much longer if we're going to make this place livable. Livable. As if the home I'd maintained for 40 years was somehow uninhabitable. She nearly died, Diane. But she didn't, did she? The edge in her voice made me flinch. And now we're stuck in limbo again. I told you we should have moved her things to storage, not just packed them. I didn't need to hear more. The next morning, I called Margaret, an old friend from my teaching days who had a small rental property behind her house. By afternoon, I had arranged to move in temporarily. I didn't tell James and Diane until everything was settled. Mom, this is ridiculous. James stood in my bedroom doorway, watching me pack a suitcase. You just got out of the hospital. You need someone to look after you. I'm not an invalid, James. The doctor says I'm recovering well. I folded another sweater, keeping my voice steady. And Margaret lives right next door to the rental. She'll check on me. But why? Why won't you let us help you? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. We're family. I paused then, a photo frame in my hand. James at 10 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, beside his science fair project. I looked from the photo to the man before me. Are we? I asked quietly. Because family doesn't pack away someone's life while they're fighting to survive in a hospital bed. His face flushed. That's not fair. Diane was just trying to... I know. Exactly what Diane was trying to do. I set the frame in my suitcase, and I know you let her. Mom, I'm 72 years old, James. I'm not senile, and I'm not helpless. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I think I can manage to live on my own a little longer. He looked stricken. No one's saying you can't. Aren't you? Because I heard you and Diane talking last night about assisted living and making this house livable. The hurt in my voice surprised even me. This was supposed to be my home for the rest of my life. Your father and I planned it that way. James had the grace to look ashamed. We just want what's best for you. It was a phrase I'd heard too many times lately, always preceding something that seemed to benefit them more than me. Later that afternoon, Margaret helped me move into her rental, a small but neat 1-bedroom cottage behind her Victorian home. It wasn't much, but it was clean and quiet, and most importantly, it was free of Diane's critical gaze and James's disappointment. That first night alone, sitting on the unfamiliar bed, I finally let myself remember how things used to be. James had always been a sensitive boy eager to please. When Robert died suddenly of a heart attack 20 years ago, James was just finishing college. He stepped up, helped with the funeral arrangements, checked on me regularly. He was my rock during those terrible first months. Then he met Diane, at his first accounting job. She was beautiful, ambitious, and from a wealthy family. Everything James thought he wanted. I tried to be welcoming. I really did. But from the beginning, there was something calculated in the way she looked at our modest home, something dismissive in her questions about my job as a high school English teacher. After they married, the visits became less frequent. When they did come, Diane always had some comment about the house. Have you thought about updating these cabinets, Martha? Or, this furniture is so vintage. The first time she called me Martha instead of Mom, James didn't even notice. But I did. When they had the twins, Emily and Michael 5 years ago, I thought things might improve. I longed to be the kind of grandmother who babysit regularly, who had special traditions with her grandchildren. But Diane always had excuses. The children were napping. They had activities. Her mother was already watching them. Her mother, Cecilia, who lived in a sprawling house in the suburbs, who had the means to shower the twins with expensive gifts and vacations I couldn't afford. Next to Cecilia, what did I have to offer? The worst part was watching James slowly adopt Diane's values. The son who once loved browsing secondhand bookstores with me now talked about investment properties and status symbols. The boy who used to help me plant my vegetable garden now complained about the outdated landscaping of my front yard. A tear slipped down my cheek as I unpacked my meager belongings in Margaret's cottage. I hadn't taken much, just clothes, some photos, a few books. What hurt most wasn't losing the furniture or the house itself, but the knowledge that the life I had built there, the memories embedded in every corner, meant nothing to my own son. Oh, Robert, I whispered to the empty room. Where did we go wrong with him? The next morning, Margaret brought over coffee and homemade scones. We sat at the tiny kitchen table, sunlight streaming through lace curtains that reminded me of my grandmother's house. You did the right thing, Martha, she said, patting my hand. Standing up for yourself. Did I? I stared into my coffee. Sometimes, I wonder if I should have just gone along with their plans. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too old to live alone. Margaret snorted. Balderdash. You've got more life in you than people half your age. You survived septicemia, for heaven's sake. If that's not proof of your resilience, I don't know what is. I smiled weakly. I just never imagined I'd be starting over at 72. Who says it's starting over? I prefer to think of it as a new chapter. She took a bite of scone. And chapters can surprise you. Remember when I divorced Harold at 65? Everyone thought I was crazy. Now I'm happier than I've been in decades. Her words were kind, but that night, alone again, doubt crept in. I had a small teacher's pension, some savings, but not enough to support myself indefinitely. The cottage was temporary. What would I do when I had to leave? Where would I go? As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that for the first time in my adult life, I had no real home, no place that was truly mine. I had no idea then that in just a few days an envelope would arrive that would change everything. The envelope arrived exactly a week after I moved into Margaret's cottage. Plain white, with a law firm's name embossed in the corner. Harrington, Wheeler and Associates. I almost dismissed it as junk mail, another solicitation for estate planning. That seemed to target people my age. But something made me open it, standing there at the small kitchen counter while the kettle whistled on the stove. Dear Mrs. Martha Caldwell, it began formally, we are writing to inform you of a financial matter that requires your attention. I had to read the letter 3 times before I could believe what it said. My hands trembled so badly that when Margaret came by for our daily coffee, she thought I was having some kind of episode. Martha? What is it? Should I call the doctor? She guided me to a chair, her face creased with concern. No. I pushed the letter toward her. Read this. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening. Oh my goodness. Martha, this is unbelievable. I finished for her. According to the letter, Robert had taken out a substantial life insurance policy just after James was born. Not the standard policy I knew about, the one that had helped me pay off our mortgage when he died, but a separate one, with a specific investment component that had been silently growing for decades. The insurance company had been trying to locate me for months, the letter explained. They had finally tracked me through my hospitalization records. The policy had matured, and as the sole beneficiary, I was entitled to the full amount, $457,000. Nearly $500,000, Margaret whispered, looking up from the letter. Martha, do you know what this means? I did. It meant freedom. It meant security. It meant I would never have to depend on James and Diane again. "Robert," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "Even after all these years, you're still taking care of me." I could almost hear his voice, feel the gentle pressure of his hand on my shoulder. "I always will, Marty girl," he would have said, using the nickname only he ever called me. The attorney, handling the case, Mr. Wheeler, arranged to meet me the following day. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner that put me at ease immediately. "Your husband was quite forward-thinking, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, spreading documents across Margaret's kitchen table. This particular type of policy wasn't common in those days. He specifically structured it to maximize long-term growth. "That sounds like Robert," I smiled, remembering how meticulously he had planned for our future. He always said I wasn't to worry about money matters. Well, he certainly took care of this one. Mr. Wheeler adjusted his glasses. "Now, there are some decisions to make about how you'd like to receive the funds." By the time he left, everything was arranged. The money would be transferred to a new account in my name only. Mr. Wheeler had also recommended a financial advisor, a woman named Lydia Ross who specialized in helping seniors manage unexpected windfalls. "Don't tell anyone about this until everything is processed," he advised as he packed up his briefcase. "Unfortunately, when money is involved, even family relationships can become complicated." I didn't need to be told twice. I had already seen how James and Diane behaved when they thought they were about to inherit my house. I couldn't imagine how they'd react to this. For 3 days, I kept the news to myself, sharing it only with Margaret, who was practically bursting with excitement for me. We spent evenings looking at property listings online, discussing investment options, even dreaming about a small trip I might take. My first vacation in over a decade. Then, on the 4th day, as I was returning from a walk, I found James, waiting on Margaret's porch. My heart sank. I wasn't ready to face him yet. But there he was, pacing nervously, his face brightening with relief when he saw me. "Mom, where have you been? I've been calling for days." I approached slowly, my hand instinctively touching the letter I kept in my cardigan pocket, as if to protect it from him. "I've been right here, James. My phone broke and I haven't replaced it yet." A small lie, but easier than admitting I'd been screening his calls. His face clouded. "You should have let me know. We've been worried sick," Diane thought. He trailed off. "Thought what? That I'd keeled over and you could finally start your renovations?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's not fair, Mom." He ran a hand through his hair. That gesture again. So like Robert's. "Look, I came to apologize. We handled things badly. I know that." I said nothing, just climbed the steps and unlocked the cottage door. After a moment's hesitation, I gestured for him to follow me inside. The cottage's small living room made James look oversized, like a grown man sitting at a child's tea party. He perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, glancing around at the modest furnishings. "It's cozy," he offered. "It's temporary," I replied, putting the kettle on. Some habits never die. No matter the conversation, tea was required. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. James leaned forward, his voice taking on that reasonable tone I'd come to dread. "Mom, this place is tiny. You can't stay here long term." I busied myself with teacups, not responding. "Diane and I have been talking. We think we found the perfect solution." He pulled a brochure from his jacket pocket. "Golden Oaks Senior Living. It's brand new, not even open yet, but they're taking reservations." I glanced at the glossy pamphlet. Pictures of smiling seniors playing cards, a dining room that looked like a hotel restaurant, apartments with emergency call buttons discreetly installed in every room. "It's not what you're thinking," James hurried on. "It's independent living, not a nursing home. You'd have your own apartment, but with staff available if you need help. There's activities, transportation services." "And how much does this paradise cost?" I asked, setting his tea before him. He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it's an investment in your future care. There's an entry fee and then monthly—" "How much, James?" He named a figure that would have decimated my savings in less than a year, before Robert's insurance policy. Of course, James didn't know about that. "I see," I said carefully. "And how exactly am I supposed to afford this?" His expression turned earnest. "That's the thing, Mom. Diane and I would help. We've been talking to a real estate agent about listing your house. Once it sells my house, I interrupted. The house you've already started redecorating for yourselves? James had the grace to look embarrassed. We would set aside money from the sale for your care. It makes the most sense financially. You've always said you wanted to leave us something, and this way, you get my house now instead of waiting for me to die. I finished for him, my voice surprisingly calm. Mom, that's a terrible thing to say. I studied my son's face, the genuine hurt in his eyes, the wounded innocence. Did he really not see how transparent his motives were? Or had he convinced himself that this truly was for my benefit? James, I said finally, setting down my teacup. I'm not selling my house so you and Diane can put me in a facility. I'm not ready for that. But Mom, no. For the first time. In years, I heard Robert's firmness in my voice. My answer is no. Something shifted in James's expression then, something calculating that reminded me so much of Diane that it chilled me. He looked around the cottage again, his gaze lingering on my few possessions. I don't think you understand your situation, Mom, he said quietly. You can't afford to live independently anymore. Your pension barely covers groceries. This place is just temporary, and then what? You need to be practical. I thought of the letter in my pocket, of the appointment I had with Lydia Ross the next day to discuss investment options for my unexpected windfall. I thought of Robert, who had quietly ensured I would never have to depend on anyone's charity, even our sons. I appreciate your concern, I said, rising to signal the end of the conversation. But I'll manage. James left frustrated, promising to return with more information about Golden Oaks. As I watched him drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The quiet certainty that I was about to take back control of my life. The following week brought 3 more visits from James, each one accompanied by a new brochure, a different angle, a fresh approach to the same goal, getting me to surrender my house and what remained of my independence. What he didn't know was that with each visit, he was only strengthening my resolve and my understanding of exactly what I needed to do next. Lydia Ross wasn't what I expected. I'd pictured a stern woman in a power suit speaking in financial jargon I couldn't understand. Instead, she was a warm, silver-haired woman about 10 years my junior, dressed in a casual blazer and comfortable shoes. She arrived at Margaret's cottage with a laptop and a plate of homemade lemon bars. My mother's recipe, she explained, setting them on the table. I find financial discussions go better with something sweet. Over the next 2 hours, Lydia walked me through options I never knew existed. She used simple language, answered my questions patiently, and never once made me feel ignorant for not understanding investment terms. So what are your goals, Martha? She asked after explaining how the inheritance could be managed. What do you want this money to do for you? I hesitated. For so long, my only goal had been simple survival, paying bills, maintaining my home, occasionally helping James when he needed it. The idea of having goals beyond that seemed almost foreign. I want security, I said finally. I want to know I'll never be at anyone's mercy, and I paused, almost embarrassed by my next thought. And, Lydia prompted gently, I want to live somewhere that's truly mine again, somewhere no one can take from me. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Those are excellent goals, and completely achievable with what you have now. By the time she left, we had a plan. A portion of the money would be invested conservatively to provide monthly income. Another portion would be set aside for a down payment on a small home or condo. The rest would go into an emergency fund and a small living well account, as Lydia called it. For those things that bring you joy, she explained. Travel, hobbies, gifts for those grandchildren. The grandchildren. My heart ached thinking of Emily and Michael. In the 2 weeks since I'd left my house, I hadn't seen them once. James hadn't offered to bring them by, and I knew better than to ask. Diane had always controlled access to the twins, doling out time with them like a miser with pennies. That evening, I sat on Margaret's small porch, watching the sunset and thinking about everything that had changed. 2 months ago, I had been in my own home, living a quiet life that seemed secure, if lonely. Then came the septicemia, the hospital, the note, the revelation of my son's true feelings, and now this unexpected inheritance. Penny for your thoughts? Margaret stepped outside, handing me a glass of wine. Just thinking about how quickly life can turn upside down. She settled into the chair beside me. For better or worse. Both, I suppose. I took a sip of wine. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Well, I think it's wonderful, Margaret declared. Not the awful business with James and that witch he married. Margaret, sorry, but you know I've never liked her. Anyway, I think Robert's gift is the universe balancing things out. You deserve this chance, Martha. I wasn't sure I believed in the universe balancing anything, but I appreciated her sentiment. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The weight of financial worry lifted from my shoulders. The next morning, I began my search for a new home in earnest. Not another large house like the one I'd shared with Robert. Something smaller, more manageable, but still mine. I spent hours online, looking at listings, exploring neighborhoods I'd never considered before. I was in the middle of this when James called Margaret's landline, sounding agitated. "Mom, we need to talk. I've been speaking with an elder law attorney about your situation, my situation, as if my life were a problem to be solved." "What situation is that, James?" He sighed, exasperated. "Your financial situation, your living arrangements, your future care, everything. Can I come by this afternoon?" I agreed, more out of curiosity than any desire to hear his latest scheme. When he arrived, he had Diane with him, a rare occurrence, since I'd moved to the cottage. She perched on Margaret's sofa like a bird ready to take flight at any moment, her designer purse clutched tightly on her lap as if afraid the cottage might soil it. "Mom," James began. Once I'd served tea, nobody wanted. "We've been looking into your options, and we think we've found the perfect solution." "We're listening," I said, including Diane, who was studiously examining her manicure. James pulled out a folder. "We've been talking to a reverse mortgage specialist. You can access the equity in your home while still living there. It's perfect." I blinked. "But I'm not living there. You two have already started renovating it." "Well, that's the thing." James exchanged a glance with Diane. "We've been thinking it over, and we realize now that was premature." "Premature," I repeated flatly. "What James is trying to say," Diane finally spoke, her voice that practiced blend of concern and condescension, "is that we realize how important your independence is to you. So we've come up with a compromise." The compromise, as they explained, it was that I would move back into my house, take out a reverse mortgage to fund my care needs, and they would live with me to help out. The mortgage would eventually pay off the house, but in the meantime, I would have all the support I needed. And of course, Diane added with a tight smile, we'd make sure the house works for everyone. The renovations we were planning would actually benefit you too, Martha. More modern, easier to navigate as you age. I sat quietly, letting them lay out their plan in detail. The mortgage figures, the renovation schedule, the division of the house into zones that would give everyone privacy. James would manage my finances to simplify things for me. Diane would oversee my medical appointments to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. It was breathtaking in its audacity. They had created an elaborate scheme to access my home's equity while I was still alive, control my finances, and essentially take over my life, all while presenting it as a generous offer to help poor, feeble Martha. "Well," James prompted when they'd finished, "what do you think?" I took a sip of my tea, now cold, and set the cup down carefully. "I think," I said slowly, "that you both must think I'm either senile or stupid." James blanched. "Mom, no, let me finish." My voice was calmer than I felt. "You want me to take out a loan against my house, which I own free and clear thanks to your father's planning, so that you can access that money for renovations that will essentially turn my home into yours. You want to manage my finances, which means controlling every penny I spend, and you want me to be grateful for the privilege." Diane's face hardened. "That's not at all what— It's exactly what you're proposing," I cut her off. "Something I'd never done before. And my answer is no." "Mom, be reasonable." James leaned forward. "You need help. You can't live independently anymore." "Can I?" I looked at my son. Really looked at him. "I raised you alone after your father died. I managed a household and a career. I took care of everything and everyone for decades. What exactly makes you think I can't take care of myself now?" "You almost died," Diane snapped. "You were in the hospital for weeks. You're living in this glorified shed because you have nowhere else to go." Margaret's glorified shed was better than anything Diane would ever offer me. But I didn't say that. "I appreciate your concern," I said instead. rising to signal the end of the discussion. But I'll be making my own decisions about my future. They left frustrated and angry, James promising to return with better information about why their plan made sense. As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. That evening, I called Lydia and asked her to help me find a real estate attorney. It was time to take definitive action about my house and about what would happen to my newly secured finances if anything happened to me. One thing was certain: I would never again be at the mercy of James and Diane's concern. 3 weeks after meeting with Lydia, I found it, a small 2-bedroom cottage in a 55-plus community. Nothing fancy, but it had a garden space and a screened porch. Most importantly, it would be mine once the paperwork went through. I hadn't told James. Each time he called or visited, I listened to his schemes with a patience I didn't feel, then politely declined. Diane had stopped coming altogether, claiming my stubbornness gave her migraines. On that particular Sunday, as I prepared for a meeting with my real estate attorney, James called with an unexpected request. "Mom, can we have lunch tomorrow? Just the 4 of us. You, me, Diane, and the twins." My heart leaped at the mention of Emily and Michael. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in over a month. "The twins are coming?" Hope crept into my voice. "Yes," James sounded relieved. "They miss you." Diane thought it would be nice to have a family lunch, to clear the air. Warning bells rang in my mind. Diane suggesting a family lunch? The same woman who kept my grandchildren from me for years? But seeing the twins overpowered my suspicion. "That would be lovely," I said. "Where should we meet?" "We thought we'd come to you. Diane will bring lunch." Around noon, I spent the rest of the day preparing. I borrowed Margaret's vacuum, arranged my few photographs, and picked wildflowers to brighten the kitchen. Margaret watched skeptically. "You know this is some kind of play, right? Diane doesn't do family lunches out of kindness." "I know," I admitted, "but I'll get to see the twins. That's worth whatever scheme they're planning." The next morning, I put on my nicest blouse, a soft blue one Robert always loved, and pearl earrings he gave me for our 30th anniversary. They made me feel closer to him somehow. "What would you do, Robert?" I asked his photograph. "How did we raise a son who sees me as nothing but an inconvenience?" Looking at Robert's kind face, I knew what he'd say. "Be strong, remember your worth, protect yourself, even from our own son, if necessary." At noon, a car pulled up. Through the window, I saw James helping the twins from their booster seats. My heart swelled. Emily with her bouncing curls skipping toward the door, Michael more cautious, holding his father's hand. Diane followed with a picnic basket, her smile forced, but I was too happy seeing the twins to care. "Grandma," Emily launched herself at me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, sweetheart." I hugged her tight, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. "My goodness, you've grown." Michael hung back but allowed me a gentle hug. "Hi, Grandma. Dad said you were sick." "I was, but I'm all better now," I assured him. James nodded stiffly, like a business acquaintance rather than my son. "Martha," Diane handed me the basket with that tight smile. "Just some sandwiches and salad." We settled around Margaret's small table. The twins chattered happily about school, friends, and swimming lessons. I treasured every word. Halfway through lunch, Diane cleared her throat. "Martha, we wanted to talk to you about something important. We've been thinking," James took over, using that reasonable tone I'd come to dread. "About your house, your future, everything." "The thing is," Diane leaned forward, "we've realized you're right. It is your house, and you should decide what happens to it." I nearly choked on my iced tea. This wasn't what I expected. "But," James continued, "we also think it makes sense for the house to stay in the family, for the twins' sake." He glanced at Emily and Michael, oblivious to the adult conversation. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked carefully. Diane's smile widened. "We're prepared to buy the house from you, Martha. At market value, you could use that money for Golden Oaks, and the house stays in the family. We'd even help you invest in the house before we buy it," James added eagerly. "Fix up the kitchen, update the bathrooms. It would increase the value, so you'd get more in the end." I sat very still. On the surface, it sounded reasonable, even generous, but I could see the calculation behind it. My modest house in a now desirable neighborhood was worth far more than what they'd pay me. The renovations would be for their benefit, not mine. "That's an interesting proposal," I said, neutrally. I'll need to think about it. What's there to think about? Diane's smile faltered. It's a win-win. You get a nest egg, we keep the house in the family. I'm just not sure I'm ready to sell, I replied, cutting Emily's sandwich into smaller pieces. After all, it's my home. But you're not even living there anymore, James pointed out, frustration edging into his voice. It's sitting empty while you're in this place. I looked up, meeting his eyes directly. And whose fault is that, James? The air thickened. Even the twins sensed the tension, their chatter falling silent. Mom, let's not do this now. James glanced at the children. Emily, Michael. I turned to my grandchildren with a warm smile. Would you like to see the garden? There's a family of cardinals nesting by the fence. They nodded eagerly, relieved to escape the tension. I watched them dash outside, then faced my son and his wife. You didn't bring the twins because they missed me, I said quietly. You brought them as leverage, to make it harder for me to say no to whatever new scheme you've concocted. That's ridiculous, Diane scoffed, but her eyes shifted away. Is it? When was the last time you voluntarily brought them to see me? James sighed heavily. Mom, we're trying to help you. No, James, you're trying to help yourselves. You've been trying to get my house since I went into the hospital. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. Did you ever think about how it felt for me to come home and find that note? To see you'd already started packing away my life? We thought you were dying, Diane hissed. The doctor said I was critical but stable, I corrected her. Not dead, but you couldn't wait, could you? James's face flushed. That's not fair, Mom. We were being practical. Practical, I repeated bitterly. Like suggesting I take out a reverse mortgage? Or this new plan to buy my house so I can be tucked away while you enjoy the home your father and I built? Through the window, I could see the twins examining something in the garden, unaware of the battle being waged over lunch. I think it's time for you to go, I said, rising. Thank you for bringing the twins. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. James stood too, his voice rising. You can't just dismiss a reasonable offer because you're emotional. I looked at my son and saw a stranger. A man so focused on what he wanted that he couldn't see the pain he was causing. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said, softly. And my answer is no. I will not sell you my house. I will not move to Golden Oaks. And I will not allow you to manage my life anymore. Diane's eyes narrowed. You can't afford to be this stubborn, Martha. You're living on a teacher's pension in a borrowed cottage. What exactly is your plan? I smiled then, a small, secretive smile. You'll find out soon enough. 1 year later, I stood on the porch of my new home, watching the moving truck pull away. The last box had been unpacked, the last picture hung. After months of paperwork, planning, and patience, I was finally settled. My new cottage wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, and a kitchen that overlooked a small garden, but it was perfect. Most importantly, it was mine. Purchased outright with Robert's unexpected gift. No mortgage, no loans, nothing anyone could use to control me. What do you think? Margaret asked, joining me on the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. I think Robert would approve, I smiled, accepting the glass. He always said we should retire somewhere with a garden. The last year had been a whirlwind of changes. After that Sunday lunch confrontation, James had been furious. He'd called repeatedly, left angry messages, even showed up at Margaret's cottage demanding to know what I meant by my cryptic comments about my plans. I'd refused to engage. Instead, I'd focused on moving forward, meeting with Lydia to finalize my financial arrangements, working with a real estate attorney to secure my new home, and quietly changing my will. The will had been the most satisfying part. I'd left specific provisions for Emily and Michael, college funds that would be managed by a trustee until they turned 21. The rest would go to several charities Robert and I had always supported. James and Diane wouldn't see a penny. Martha? Earth to Martha. Margaret waved her hand in front of my face, breaking my reverie. Sorry, I laughed, just thinking about everything that's happened. Have you heard from them lately? She asked, settling into one of the porch chairs. James called last week, I said, sitting beside her, when he found out I'd sold the house. The sale had been quick and profitable. A young family had fallen in love with it. A couple with 2 small children who saw the potential in the old rooms, the character in the worn floors. I'd liked them immediately. They would bring new life to the house, create their own memories there. It felt right. How did he take it? Margaret asked. About as well as you'd expect, I sighed. He couldn't believe I'd sold it out from under. Them, as he put it, said I'd betrayed the family. The irony, Margaret snorted, after what they tried to do to you. The strangest part was, I didn't feel angry anymore, I mused. Just sad. Sad that he couldn't see what he'd become. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Expecting someone? As a matter of fact, yes, I smiled, setting down my tea and straightening my blouse before heading to the door. Emily and Michael stood on the doorstep, beaming. Behind them, looking uncomfortable but determined, was my daughter-in-law's mother, Cecilia. "Grandma!" the twins chorused, launching themselves at me for hugs. "Hello, my darlings," I laughed, embracing them both. "And Cecilia, thank you for bringing them." Cecilia nodded stiffly. 2 hours, as agreed. I'll be back at 5. This new arrangement had been unexpected. After the house sale, when James and Diane had effectively cut me off from the twins in retaliation, Cecilia had reached out. Though she'd never particularly liked me, she recognized the cruelty of keeping children from their grandmother. "It's wrong," she'd said simply during our first awkward phone call. "Whatever happened between you and James, the children shouldn't suffer." So we'd reached a detente. This woman who had everything in common with her daughter and nothing with me. Twice a month she brought Emily and Michael to visit, returning them home without James and Diane being any the wiser. An unlikely ally, but I was grateful. The twins bounded into the cottage, exclaiming over every new feature. "You have your own swimming pool, Grandma," Michael marveled, pressing his face against the window that overlooked the community pool. "Well, I share it with the neighbors," I laughed. "But yes, you can swim when you visit in summer." As they explored, I showed them the room I'd prepared specially, one with twin beds, bright colors, and shelves stocked with books and games. "This is your room," I told them, "whenever you visit." Their eyes widened with delight. "Really? Our very own room? Really?" I confirmed. "Now who wants to help me bake cookies?" Later, as the twins helped Margaret in the garden, I sat on the porch watching them. The pain of James's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had eased. In its place was something new, a sense of peace, of rightness. I had survived septicemia. I had survived betrayal. I had survived being cast aside by the son I'd raised. And in surviving, I'd found strength I never knew I possessed. My new neighbors waved as they walked past, other residents of the 55-plus community who had quickly become friends. Next week, I would start volunteering at the local library. The month after, I had signed up for a watercolor class. My days were filling with purpose again. I thought of Robert, of the life we'd planned together, the years cut short by his heart attack. He would have been proud of this new chapter, proud of me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my small garden where my grandchildren played. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, this moment was enough, more than enough. It was everything.